The sun has come up in Iran this morning, and now we have more visibility on exactly what happened with Israel's strike against Iran last night. And we're starting to put together the pieces of exactly what did happen, what didn't happen, and what may come next. First of all, I just want to go in, and if you hadn't seen some of the news yet, really kind of the bottom line is that Israel, according to them and according to many Iranian sources as well, struck a total of 20 targets inside of Iran. It was conducted in two waves of attack. It was apparently had included up to 100 total aircraft that were taking part in it, some of which you can see on the screen right there getting ready. In terms of what actually was struck, it's unclear. Iranian air defense was definitely active, and by all accounts, did shoot down some of the missiles and some of the rockets. It's unclear how, because at least according to what's being reported so far, there don't appear to be 20 separate locations that were actually hit. And in fact, what has been reported so far is that really the main damage was a radar installation, an S-300 radar installation used for Iranian air defense was knocked out. And that's apparently where the two Iranian soldiers who were killed in action. And thus far, according to the Iranian government, those are the only two casualties from this war. Some of the bigger questions, though, is why was the strike as limited as it was? We've been showing you really comments from senior Israeli leaders from October the 1st, when the last Iranian strike came, all the way through up to just a few days ago, that they were very, very adamant that something strong, something lethal, and something painful and unexpected would come. And yet, when you actually see what unfolded, there was nothing painful about it. It was actually quite tepid in its reaction. It was comparatively small. It was, I had speculated that one of the possibilities might be a small sort of just tit for tat situation to just kind of say, okay, we're here, we responded, but we're not going to carry it any further. I actually consider that on the lower end of the possibility, just because Israeli leadership has shown that hasn't restrained itself in almost any category so far. So I was a little surprised that they weren't, but very grateful for that. Anytime you lower the chance of retaliation, a response, and an escalation that could get the U.S. sucked in, that's a good day. And that's where I think we are at the moment. But everything depends on what happens next. Now, I want to first of all show you, really in light of these, declarative statements about how painful this strike was going to be heading into it, here is the official statement, Daniel Hagari this morning, talking about what did happen.
We conducted targeted and precise strikes on military targets in Iran, thwarting immediate threats to the state of Israel. The Israel Defense Forces has fulfilled its mission. If the regime in Iran were to make the mistake of beginning a new round of escalation, we will be obligated to respond.
Yeah, and so he's saying right now that, they want to sound like, yeah, we hit this stuff and we showed them. But when you look at what the Iranians are saying, and even without knowing what they said, you can just imagine that if of all of that buildup, that's all that was happening, that didn't really send any kind of a message to Iran. And it's also interesting that he wants to characterize that if Iran responds or starts a new round of escalation. This was the second response. Iran has always responded to an Israeli strike first. I mean, you go back to the destruction of the embassy facility, the Iranian embassy facility by Israel in Syria in April of this year. Iran responded. Then you had the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, in the capital city. Israel responded on October 1st. And now then, they said, and in each case, this is the end of it as long as they stop. And then now Israel has launched this one. Now, the likelihood, I think, is going to be that Iran is going to say, all right, well, that wasn't that bad. It wasn't a mass casualty causing event. And by all accounts, the Iranian air defense system was fairly successful. We don't have any details yet, and you can see some of it going off right there. This is from Tehran. And you can see actually a significant amount of air defense in the air. It's unclear, and we may have to have Ted Postal back on, who knows how to interpret a lot of these things, of exactly what happened and what was struck. But I mean, you can see what appears to be some missiles flying sideways across toward the end of this clip, and then you'll see what appears to be interceptions going on there. We'll have to get his interpretation there. But again, Israel said they attacked 20 targets, and so far we've only seen evidence of just a couple. Maybe there's more, maybe there's some elsewhere, and there's just not video. But in any case, the cost to Iran has been very, very slight. Now, I think in Washington there was a huge sigh of relief when this happened in the White House. Because we've been sending lots of folks. The Secretary of State was just there. The Secretary of Defense met with his counterpart. We don't know if Biden himself actually made any phone calls. He doesn't seem to do a lot of that with Netanyahu, but we do know that the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense personally went and talked to their counterparts. So one would imagine that we put a lot of pressure on them, and you certainly can understand from Biden's perspective, ever keeping his eye on the electoral ball, that the U.S. election is 10 days away. And I think the last thing that anybody in the White House wanted was some kind of a big, huge casualty counting event, which could spawn an Iranian response, which could draw the United States into war. They wouldn't want to have to answer any of those questions prior to the election. So that may have bought them some time. And based on Iran's responses from their leaders, overnight, they may get their wish. So this may not have exploded, and it could well be the end of it, or at least it will be for a period of time. We'll see that in just a second. But listen, that's one thing. So we avoided this war going on further. But as I'm going to show you here, it could be because Israel did a calculation. Maybe they were watching the Daniel Davis deep dive, and they saw how we talked about that they've bit off more than they can chew already. And it could be that they came to the conclusion that, okay, this is not the time to open this next front in an all-out war, perhaps because, and this is speculation, but given what happened, it's not implausible that the United States may have said, hey, you know what? If you launch this and you get into a war with Iran because you overreach, we're not going to go to war with you. We may help you, shoot down some incoming missiles or something. But if you think that you're going to drag us into a war, you're going to be bitterly disappointed. We are not going to war. I hope that is what happened, because that's certainly what should happen. And if that was the case, then you could understand why Israel would pull some of its punches, because it can't handle Iran if it has to fight it by itself. Because right now they're continuing to fight on all the other fronts. For example, the war in Gaza continues to rage on with no slowdown at all. And as we talked about, it's kind of fallen off the headlines here lately, but the fighting there is quite intense, and large numbers of people keep dying every day. Israel continues to lose troops of their own. There was another Merkava tank in the Gaza Strip that was hit, where 3 of the crew members were killed by some of the still lethal capabilities of Hamas, or whoever is actually fighting against Israel now. And as I've told you many times, no matter how many Hamas actual fighters that existed on 10/7 of last year may have been killed, there is no shortage of practically any male in that country that's willing to fight against them now. And Israel is currently on a population or on a drive to completely eradicate the entire population from the northern part of Gaza Strip. And they are literally methodically moving them past. They're continuing to have large numbers of airstrikes going in and killing people. And as that headline there just showed you, there is tremendous amounts of casualties on the Palestinian side. Their misery has not slowed down at all. In fact, you can see that highlighted part there. The UN's leading humanitarian aid official has cautioned that given the rapidly worsening conditions and an intense weeks-long offensive by the Israeli army, the entire population of North Gaza is at risk of dying, being starved to death, or being blown up. And there was also some operations, and I think they're still ongoing. And no, I'm sorry, I read this morning that they actually had completed it in one of the last remaining hospitals in the entire Gaza Strip, where Israel had actually gone inside the hospital and destroyed a great deal of its capacity. It's a very limited capacity to provide any kind of help. Depending on who you talk to, they either took a handful of the actual hospital personnel or a large number of them, depending on the claimed on the other side. But we do know that some, because both sides are admitting that Israel went in there and destroyed a great deal of the capacity and did take the medical hospital staff, some number of them, out and to some unknown location. And of course, the net is that now the people of Palestine who are wounded and hurt in combat or in the rubble of the fallout of the explosions, they don't have anywhere to go for any kind of medical help. And of course, many are going to die without just basic hospital capabilities. Now, I'm going to show you a bit of a video clip here that's been going on. Thanks for that, Gary. That's the headline there. They say that now this in the what is it? I guess it's the 14th month of war. Hard to believe, but it's actually getting at its darkest moment now, and it's continuing to unfold for the people of Palestine. This video I'm about to show you, it's not going to have any audio for a couple of reasons. One, it's got some music behind it, and that can often get us demonetized, and we don't want to get into that. But it's also hard to listen to because you're going to see in it a mother who's talking about some of her losses, and I'll just tell you, listen to it live, it's hard to hear. But Gary, go ahead and roll that tape. This is what's been going on by Israel. It says that these are some of the 14 kids killed by an Israeli strike on their house. 13 were from the same family, and there's some blurred out pictures here, but you can see them. This woman says, "My son was killed. He was 5 years old. He was martyred." She says, "My husband was martyred at the beginning of the war." And you see the grief on the screen there. And they targeted him, though he had no relation to Hamas, she says. "I don't know what they want from us." She continues. Now, the Israel strike hit several residential buildings, which you can see on the screen there, and it's literally turned to dust. Nothing left in it. This crater is all that remains of one, it says on the screen right there. And goodness, 38 people in total died in this bombing. 38 people in residential houses. And you can see this kid here says, "I ran to my mother. I didn't know what to do. While I was trying to dig her out, I looked up and I saw a tank aiming at me. Everyone was doing the same and digging in fear. Then a quadcopter came and started shooting at us." So you see, it's really, really getting hard for Israel to claim, "Oh, well, Hamas was using them as human shields and they were hiding in the basement," or whatever. I mean, that's kind of a boilerplate that they say. And look, it's just common sense that there can't be, literally a Hamas hiding in every house, and that they're just spread out there. So every single building they take down was a legitimate military target. I mean, that's long since been exposed as just being ridiculous. And it's very clear through what you can see with your own eyes that Israel is trying to systematically wipe out the ability of anyone to live in the Gaza Strip. And then you see it from the eyewitnesses right there, even while they're trying to dig out the rubble. Then after the bomb comes in, you see the ground troops come in and they start to shoot any male that they see. And I don't know if that was a male. Who knows if they're shooting anyone that they see. But they were definitely, they're trying to pull people out of the rubble. If they appear, they're being taken under fire. And then you had the quadcopters come in, and they're also taking people under fire that they see are just trying to recover bodies, trying to dig people out of the rubble that may still be alive. That's the reality, folks. I know some of you don't like it. I know especially some of those supporters of Israel want to believe all the statements that they hear, that this is just going after Hamas and this is what they did to us on October 7th, 2023, etc. We're way past that, folks. Look, even if you're for Israel, you can't be blind to what's going on. This is the hard, ugly truth of what's happening here. And I'm just telling you from someone who cares about the Israeli people, who cares about the Jews, who also cares equally about the Palestinian people. There will be no peace for anyone in Israel. They will not succeed in this war. They won't even win in the one section here of Hamas, much less the other ones, which we're going to get to in a second. If you care about Israel, if you want them to have peace, this is the worst thing they can do. The path that they're on right now will not get peace. It will just engender more and more hatred. It will build up over time more and more vows of revenge, because many of these people can't do anything. Just imagine that kid there who was trying to dig out relatives out of the rubble, and he's getting taken by Israeli gunships and tanks and whatnot. I mean, what do you think he's going to do in the future? Let's say that the war ends 6 months from now. We'll just say, what do you think is going to happen after that? Do you think this kid is going to say, "Okay, well, great, I'll go and just for the rest of the foreseeable future, I'll be living in this dust that used to be a house, and I'll just put a tent up or whatever kind of material I can to block myself from the wind or whatever, and I'll just be content? I mean, does anybody think that's going to happen? That now then we'll live at peace with Israel? I don't think I have to fill in the rest of the blank there. You can do that for yourself. That's not all there is, though. Let's see. Of course, that's just in the Gaza Strip. Israel is also continuing its forward momentum into southern Lebanon, and they're also taking lots of casualties there. There's been reports even this morning of additional Israeli Defense Force casualties in southern Lebanon. They keep getting hit more and more, and it's self-evident why. This can't be surprising anybody in Israel. This is a very, very difficult military task. Again, taking the emotion out of it, taking the morality out of it, just in terms of military task, this is an incredibly difficult task to unseat and dig out all of these defensive positions that are scattered almost like salt all throughout the land, and definitely all the southern part up to the Litani River, but even beyond that. And so no matter how far you go, you're always going to have a front line. And unless they try to conquer the entire country of Lebanon, which they don't have the capacity to do, no matter where they, quote, stop, there's going to be a new front line, and there's going to be antagonism, and there's going to be rockets, etc. That's why I keep telling you, they have encountered something. They have launched themselves into an operation.
This is a village in southern Lebanon.
This is what one of the Israelis claim, and this is why they actually say they hit all these buildings, because they claim that every building has a missile in it. You see in this mock-up of a computer simulation, which is entirely fictitious. They've just claimed this. I'm sure there are some. There's no doubt there are some. In fact, there's photograph and video evidence of it. But what they're claiming is that everything they hit is, and there is zero evidence that that's true. In fact, most of the rockets and whatnot that the Hezbollah side has is actually buried in the side of mountains or underground that can then be brought out to fire and moved back in for protective purposes. Things in house are too easy to fire and hit once they fire it, or once it's discovered. So there are some, but not that many of them. And certainly not everything that's hit. And the casualties have been horrific from there. So that's the condition there. You see that when Israel was deciding what it's going to do to Iran, they had to think of what we have in front of us now. And the situation in the Gaza Strip is quite hot and still has a significant amount of activity to go, because they're just now in the northern part. They still have to go into the central part and then into the southern part again, if they're going to continue doing what they're doing. And it would make no sense militarily to do what they've done up to this point and then stop in northern Gaza, because everything will have just been pushed to the south again. So there's no apparent attainable military objective even in Gaza, much less in Lebanon. And in that environment here, you can see why Israel may have said, well, let's don't open a new one just yet. And I think that as we're going to see here, I think it is a just yet, and not the, well, all right, well, that was a bad idea. Let's just don't go after Iran. And let me show you why that is. First of all, let's take a look at both sides in response to this. The senior officials from both sides have indicated this is not necessarily the end. What happened tonight? In fact, Gary, if you could throw that headline up there, want to look at what they were saying, both sides there. This is just from this morning. The Israeli army announced that the operation was complete, and military spokesman Daniel Hagari said that Iran carried out retaliatory strikes. If Iran carries out more retaliatory strikes, Israel will be, quote, obligated to respond. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said Iran was, quote, entitled and obligated to defend itself against external aggressive acts after the attacks on its soil. So you have both saying, maybe it's not over. Maybe it's just over for today. Maybe Biden got his way and it's just over for at least 10 days, so he didn't have to worry about any difficulties in a very, very difficult presidential election coming up pretty soon. But then you look that everybody's not happy with this. In fact, nobody's happy with this other than perhaps Biden. Even in Israel, the opposition is quite unhappy with this. Opposition leader Yair Lapid, writing on X platform, said the decision not to attack strategic and economic targets in Iran was wrong, adding that Iran leads the axis of evil and should pay a heavy price for its belligerence. I assure you, he is most definitely not alone. We've shown Naftali Bennett, former Israeli prime minister, who was just beside himself with eagerness to say that Israel should attack the nuclear sites, they should attack their energy sites, they should attack the IRGC sites and cause lots of damage and casualties. I've been looking. He has not yet made any public statements. We'll be watching that very carefully to see, because he's probably not very happy. And there were many others in Israel that said the same thing, that they thought, well, this was our golden opportunity. Naftali Bennett himself said this was a once in a 50-year chance. Others in the opposition side have said that. Ben Gvir, I'll be watching to see what he says publicly. Nothing from him so far, or Smotrich, because we know that they are just eager to go after Iran. Now, they're emotionally eager, but militarily, it could be that, again, Israel looked at its composition of forces, looked at all of its resources and said, okay, I don't care what y'all want. That's a bridge too far. We can't do that, at least not yet. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Iranian side, a lot of them are also not very happy. They want more in this. In fact, Amir Hossein Sebeti, the ultra-conservative MP from Tehran, also said on X, quote, stable security depends on authority and a strong response to the smallest mistake of the enemy. Although the Mountain of Israel gave birth to a mouse last night, the violation of Iran's red line and the invasion of the country's territory must be answered at a level that will surprise them. But then he adds this is very important. The best time to respond is when they are engaged in an attritional war in Gaza and Beirut. So there is clearly an idea on some in the Iranian side that, okay, we probably don't need to do anything right now. In fact, I'm sure that in the Ayatollah and their IRGC leaders are probably saying, let's just keep our powder dry. Let's keep our weapons at the ready. Let's continue to build up our arsenals. But I think they can see the same things I'm talking to you about right now, and they are getting sogged into deeper into a war in Gaza that has no apparent military resolution in the foreseeable future. Just more and more casualties from the IDF side and more condemnation from the international side. Meanwhile, in southern Lebanon, that's an even worse situation. And if Israel continues to go in there without setting an attainable military objective, even a minor one, they're at risk of getting into an attritional war there and just continue going forward. And I think it's reasonable to suggest that the Lebanese side, whether it's Hezbollah or anybody else, has a lot more willingness to die for their cause. And I don't see any evidence that they're just going to suddenly give up because they get bombed into oblivion like many in the Israeli side want. So if from the Iranian side, you can see that they may say, let's just let this play out a little bit longer. Let's see how far that they can go before they start to get weak. Because if Israel starts getting into a weakened spot, then it's potential for Iran to strike something at that time that could really harm Israel. Or they may just say, we don't need to do anything. We'll just continue to let things run out there and let Israel drive itself into the ground, and that may solve their problem. Because listen, at the heart of it, Iran doesn't want war. They have conclusively shown that despite all the rhetoric about how they're this axis of evil and how are intent upon the destruction of Israel, they don't have the capacity to act on it. They have definitely said that for many, many, many years. But it's clearly just a rhetorical flourish for a domestic audience because they don't have the capacity. I mean, they physically, literally cannot wipe Israel off of anything. And the leaders actually know that. So there is every reason to think that Iran could say, okay, you know what? We're going to still stay beneath the threshold. We're not going to go to a nuclear weapons program. We're not going to launch any kind of preemptive attack at all against Israel, and other than responding to something that happens. But this one is below the threshold, and I bet they don't respond. I don't think there will be anything more in the foreseeable future from Iran. Not now. They're going to wait and see how things develop. That's what they've done. That's what they did when the United States assassinated Soleimani in 2020. That they really constrained themselves after the April destruction of their embassy, after the assassination of Hania in Tehran, etc. So I think that you'll probably see that continue on. And that's not good news for Israel, frankly, because if they don't change their course of action, the Iranian strategy could prove successful of letting Israel do itself harm. But it's funny because the United States, we can't, in our reaction to this, we just can't seem to get at this Orwell thing. I guess it's just once it becomes part of your vocabulary, you just can't seem to help yourself. Instead of just saying anything like "this is what happened," then we have to add some context to it, and again try to make things sound like we want them to. This is one of the U.S. Security Council spokesman, Sean Savitt, said. He said, "We urge Iran to cease its attacks on Israel so that this cycle of fighting can end without further escalation." He says, without any apparent irony, that this is that Iran has only responded to Israeli opportunities and attacks, as we've just mentioned a second ago. But he keeps making it sound like Iran is the one who is initiating all this, and Israel is just defending itself from what had happened before. Then he says their response was an exercise, there being the Israeli side, was a response in exercise in self-defense, and specifically avoided populated areas and focused solely on military targets, contrary to Iran's attack against Israel that targeted Israel's most populated cities, which is ridiculous. I mean, that is just patently untrue. Iran specifically, in both of its attacks, both in April and in October, avoided cities. I've even made comment here that if those attacks, especially that last one, had been centered in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or any Haifa, any other major city, it would have caused devastation and considerable civilian casualties, none of which happened. Iran did not attack any of those things. It only attacked military targets. But we apparently don't want to say that out loud, because then it makes it sound like Iran is reasonable. So we want to make it sound like people are unreasonable. And I bet that a number of people who read that and hear that comment from him, just without knowing, without looking, said, yeah, because we know that Iran is evil and they're this axis of evil. And so they did. Wow. They attacked Israeli cities, but Israel was the bigger guy and they only attacked military targets. I guess some people will believe that. It's just disappointing that we can't just report what happened. We can't just make statements, how things are from our perspective. We have to add lies into it and deception and try to make things look some other way, like Orwell. I'm just disappointed, but that is what it is. One of the other couple of interesting things that also happened about this, and one of which leads me to believe that Israel is not wanting to escalate this. The first one is interesting because Russia has reported that they gave intelligence to the Iranian side of what was coming ahead of time. How they knew that is not discussed. But apparently Russia has been sharing intelligence with Iran before the attack so that they were able to prepare themselves and get ready. Now, that, of course, is not surprising, given that the just completed BRICS summit, where Iran is now a part of that BRICS. So both Russia and China have every incentive to make sure that the Iranian regime remains intact and that it remains prepared for anything that may happen. That may also be one of the reasons for restraint on the side of Israel. This part we don't know at all. I haven't seen any rumors to this effect. But given the fact that both China, who needs the Iranian oil to keep flowing without problem, they need the global price of oil to stay where it is and to not spike up because of something that Iran does. And Russia needs Iran to stay where they are so that they can continue helping out with the drone capabilities and other kinds of support that they're providing to Russia in its war with Ukraine. And one can imagine that both China and Russia were probably engaged diplomatically with Israel to try and get them to tone down what's happening. So I think when you look all about what happened on the ground and what is likely to have happened diplomatically behind the scenes, then this next comment here about that actually Israel itself is reported to have given signals to Iran of what was coming beforehand. And one can imagine that Israel said that, look, if you don't attack us back, this is all we're going to do. We're going to do this little stuff here, and we can just be done with it for the time being. And that makes a lot of sense because Israel, by all accounts, was wanting to avoid escalation. And then they'll say, whatever they want to sound tough, like you've seen Hagari, and I'm sure some others in the coming days. I can imagine on the U.S. Sunday shows tomorrow there'll be all kinds of braggadocious claims or whatever. And I'm sure Iran will make its own, but I think behind the scenes, both say, look, we don't want a war. This is not a time for it. And that's why I say that I keep using this phrase that Israel doesn't want to attack Iran yet. Because when you look at what Israel is doing behind the scenes off the major headlines, it looks by all accounts that Israel is trying to say to themselves, this is going to be a long war. This is not anything that's going to be over anytime soon. And in fact, when you look at their budget and what they're doing, Israel is preparing for a long regional war. They have significantly expanded their current and future budgets up to the year 2028. And their finances projections, however, indicate an annual spending increase of 55 billion shekels. That's about $14 billion a year increase is likely during that period of time. And in short, as this report indicates, it is evident that Israel is moving towards a profound shift in the structure of its military based on a long-term war that aligns with its regional ambitions. So it appears that it's very likely that Israel may have said, all right, we don't want a big, huge regional war right now, especially, and I hope that the United States may be indicating that we're not going to fight on the side of Israel and that they would be alone. We might, I'm sure, would continue to give them weapons, but the Israeli military by itself still can't fight all of these wars at the same time as a big major war against Iran. And it could be that they say, okay, all right, we'll just temper ourselves for the time being. Let's take care of these two big fights here in the Gaza Strip. You can also add the West Bank into that. And of course, there's also the Houthis in Yemen and the situation in Lebanon. And Israel may be saying, all right, we're going to prepare multi-year for this. So folks, you might as well get comfortable here because this war is not going to be over anytime soon. All of the evidence says that Israel has trimmed its sails for the time being on Iran. Now, this is such a volatile situation. Anything could spin it out of control. So I'm not saying, that you're safe or that the situation is going to be contained, because there's a lot more potential for problems and surprises, even in the wars that are being fought right now. I mean, for example, let's say that the Houthis launch another strike, or that Hezbollah launches another strike and tries to take out the prime minister of Israel, Netanyahu, and then this time they succeed. Or they take out some other major leader, then you can get an explosive thing. So this remains very, very volatile, and it's unlikely to me that Israel is going to successfully drag this thing out through the year 2028 and thinking then it's going to have a military success, that they'll just slowly grind down all of the people in the Palestinian areas, that they'll eventually grind all the way up to some decided point, the Litani River, whatever they may do, and then they may say, okay, yeah, we're done here. Israel has understanding they've never done this in their history. In their history, fought a long war. They fought the 6-Day War in 1967. They fought, I think it was 3 weeks in the 1973, 34 days in the Second Lebanon War. They've all been short, sharp, and clearly defined end states, and then they've gone back. They had from 1982 to 2000. I can't remember, 2001. They occupied Lebanon. They saw that was a bad thing. So occupations have never worked out for them. But in terms of actual wars, they've been very short in duration, like nothing more than a month until this one. So Israel doesn't have a lot of experience of how to conduct a long war, and a major ones like that they have already opened up. This Pandora box is not going to get closed anytime soon. They've committed themselves into southern Lebanon, and that's not going to just end overnight. That's going to be something very difficult for them to manage. You see what's happening in the Gaza Strip. They're in constant threat of overextending themselves there. And at some point, and it's impossible to say where, global public opinion could decisively turn against them. Those videos, or that one video I showed, is just one of scores of videos probably that come out every day over there. And one never knows when public opinion may turn against Israel. And then even the United States, it could be in a position where we can't support them with the continued weapons without ourselves becoming a pariah. We don't know that. Those are all things that are unknowable, but possible. So the bottom line is here, and the thing you understand is Israel is in a perilous condition. And if you care about Israel, you should be one of the first ones to advocate that they find whatever it takes to bring all of these wars to an end quickly. Get a ceasefire in the battle against Hamas. Get a ceasefire in the situation against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Get it on the diplomatic table. Start talking about things. That is what Israel needs to do, because they just can't win this militarily. And if they keep trying, they will be in grave danger of actually losing, or seeing this thing explode to a point to where Iran actually does engage with its full might. And I assure you that even though they have the THAAD system, and the U.S. Has an aircraft carrier strike group in the region, and all of Israel's Iron Dome, David Sling, and all that, if they get into a full-on war with Iran, their systems will not be able to protect them against the barrage of weapons that Iran can bring to bear, and Israel could suffer grievous damage and grievous casualties. This could get a lot worse. We pray that it doesn't. And we're going to continue to keep you updated on this all the way through. Really appreciate you guys coming on a Saturday here, but we wanted to make sure you were fully updated on what's going on and what may come next and what's at stake here, because that's the most important thing. Thank you very much for being with us today. Be sure and like and subscribe. And also to want to let you know, we are on podcasts. And I know a lot of people, they just don't have time to watch a video all the time, but they love these podcasts where you can listen to it as you're doing other stuff. We have added our names to that list so that you can do that. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict. Just type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive and you will find us there. Thank you very much. And we will see you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.